Today, there are more than 16,000 unique LEGO minifigure parts, and heads come in all types of styles, with infinite combinations of eyes, mouths, glasses, makeup, scars, and more. But there's one feature that's conspicuously absent: noses. While there are several examples of minifigures with noses, the fact is that 99% of LEGO minifigure heads don't have one. But why? And has LEGO begun printing more noses on minifigures these days? Let's find out. In 1963, the State Mutual Life Assurance Company hired a graphic designer named Harvey Ross Ball to create an image to raise morale among the employees after a rough period for the company. The image he came up with was both calming and incredibly simple, and would become a design icon for the next 60 years, the smiley face. While this exact version would see several changes and refinements over the decades, the overall aesthetic has been almost entirely unchanged: a yellow face with two simple black dots for eyes and an upturned, smiling mouth. But do you see what it doesn't have? Yeah, there's no nose. In 1978, LEGO launched the first modern minifigure in set number 600 called Police Car. The build itself was nothing special with only 23 pieces, but it included the very first copy of what would become a now legendary smiling face. Whether or not LEGO was directly inspired by Ball's work is something of a mystery, as there are seemingly no notes from the meeting where the design was finalized. Either way, the resemblance is certainly uncanny. However, there's a good reason to believe that this may have just been pure coincidence. The modern minifigure was designed by a LEGO employee named Jens Nygaard Knudsen, and it was patented in 1977. In this version of the US patent, you can clearly see the minifigure head has the two basic dots and a smiling pattern, so this design was intended from the very beginning. And if you want to add this piece of LEGO history to your wall, I've got these stylized prints available at SpitBrix.com, link in the description. But why did LEGO choose such a simple head design, and why did they choose yellow? Well, it turns out that the answer to both these questions is largely the same, because as a company, LEGO has always had a focus on inclusivity. Nowadays, that takes the form of minifigures with a range of realistic skin tones and handicaps, but that wasn't always the approach. When LEGO was first getting started with minifigures, they didn't have quite the same degree of resources that they do today, and even the decision of creating these plastic people in the first place was a gamble at the time, so it made sense to try and create a unified design that anyone could relate to. The plain, minimalist expression was a perfect choice, as anyone could project any character they wanted onto it. Apparently, there was even some discussion about keeping the heads blank to make it even easier to imagine whatever you wanted, but the blank faces were a little bit creepy, and the decision was quickly made to add a face. But why yellow? In the late 1970s, LEGO had a limited color palette of red, blue, yellow, black, white, and transparent. The darker colors would struggle to show contrast with the faces printed in black, and so this left really only white and yellow as viable options, and LEGO chose yellow because it's just a happy, cheerful color that the company thought kids would like. Even as LEGO rolled out dozens of new colors over the years, yellow stayed the default for minifigures until the early 2000s, as more accurate skin colors began to be introduced, with themes such as LEGO Sports, because LEGO created specific players. But yellow is still by far the most common color today. So was this original design based on Ball's work? Probably not directly, but it's certainly possible that Jens Knudsen saw the design, liked it, and drew some inspiration from it. But still, what about noses? Well, it turns out that noses were briefly considered during the initial design phase of the minifigure's predecessor, but this specific design was scrapped for a few reasons. First off, simplicity. The lack of a nose contributes to the minifigure's more minimalist design, which encourages imagination and playability. Secondly, the simpler design helps maintain consistency across LEGO's different themes. A uniform look makes it easier to mix and match parts from different minifigures without worrying if it, quote, looks right. But by the 1990s, things were changing. LEGO had been experimenting with new minifigure face designs since 1989 when they launched the Pirates theme, which was the first to contain minifigures with different facial expressions and body parts. Spikes of hair were printed on the front of the face to give them some bangs, and additionally other facial features were added, such as stubble and mustaches on male pirates. In fact, an eye patch was also introduced to give that classic pirate look, and female pirates had a thicker red line added to them to give them fuller red lips. While these pirates had blank spaces where their noses should be, there was nothing printed on them, leaving us to fill in the blanks with our own imaginations. While these faces gave us a hint that minifigures did have noses, this wasn't confirmed until a few years later. In 1995, LEGO released 4 new sets in the pirates and castle themes, which came with a brand new element, the minifigure skull. While this piece also had the same 2 eyes and mouth that we'd grown used to, it also featured something never seen before: a nose, or at least the hole in the skull where the nose would be. Finally, we knew for sure that LEGO minifigures did in fact have noses. So where were they? Fast forward just one short year to 1996 and we finally got our answer. That year, LEGO rolled out the Wild West line and gave us some truly revolutionary minifigure designs. Just take a look at the infamous outlaw Prairie Pete, or Flatfoot Thompson as he was referred to in a few different countries. This guy had what might be the first ever LEGO nose on a minifigure. It's little more than just a curved line in the middle of his angry, scrunched up face, but it's undeniably a nose. And he wasn't the only character from this line to have one. As anyone who's ever seen a Western movie knows, where there are cowboys, there are also Indians. And while that particular term has largely fallen out of favor these days, it's the term that LEGO used throughout production, and these minifigures are still officially called Indian, Indian Chief, and Indian Medicine Man. These are just a few of the several Indian minifigures that LEGO produced over the 2-year run of this theme, and they all had rather large, pronounced noses. Also in 1996, LEGO rolled out the absolutely fantastic Time Cruisers line, and that theme's hero, Timmy, also had a printed nose, though this was a totally different design. It seemed that LEGO was more than willing to play around with what a minifigure looked like. But before we go further, we actually need to go back a few years to 1993 when LEGO rolled out the Technic figure. These guys were much larger than a standard LEGO minifigure, which meant that they could get away with a little bit more detail. And apparently that meant adding a molded nose to the front of each face. While the printed noses on some minifigures are a bit cursed looking, I'd have to admit that these molded noses actually look pretty good. I wonder if LEGO will ever try to bring these back in addition to regular minifigures. Oh, and check out the side of the head. See those? Yup, these guys also got ears long before minifigures did. At the end of the 1990s, LEGO was making some major changes to the way that they approached minifigure design. This was due to the fact that LEGO had acquired the rights to Star Wars, and these figures needed to be handled a little bit differently. Most notable for this video is that the company decided that minifigure heads no longer needed to be the standard shape and size. The first LEGO minifigure with a non-standard head was Jar Jar Binks, who came in 3 sets in 1999. While this early version wasn't printed, the mold had plenty of detail, including 2 very visible nostrils in the middle, making him the first modern minifigure ever to have a molded nose. Also, look at the size of those giant ears. In 2005, LEGO rolled out what might be the most ironic minifigure of all time in the Graveyard Duel from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This set comes with 6 minifigures, but the only one with a nose is the Dark Lord himself. Yup, Voldemort, who is famously known to not have a nose, remains as one of the only minifigures to ever receive a printed nose. Why? Well, good question, but this wasn't a one-and-done deal either. Voldemort has been redesigned a few times, but has always had a printed nose. Over the next several years, LEGO would continue to experiment with noses here and there, but they were largely absent from printed minifigure faces for the most part. However, there were a few notable exceptions, such as 2012's Flying Dutchman from the SpongeBob SquarePants set of the same name, as well as all of the LEGO Chima minifigure heads released from 2013 to 2015 for countless different characters in the theme. There was also the Scarecrow released for 2019's LEGO Movie 2, and around that same time we also got these Na'vi minifigures with printed noses and what's that? Molded ears? Yeah, that's pretty cool, but more on that later. Okay, so while printed noses have remained incredibly rare, there's another type of nose that we've seen a few times over the years, the molded nose, and these have a whole different story attached to them. These 3D noses go all the way back to the original Technic figures, but it wasn't really until around 2010 with the release of Woody that custom molded heads and distinct 3D noses really took off. 3D nose adoption really accelerated in 2014 with the Simpsons house and the very first series of Simpsons collectible minifigures. This really changed a lot of things for LEGO. Each of these figures came with a molded head complete with noses and ears. To this day, this is the most extensive set of unique printed heads and noses to ever appear in a LEGO theme, and we're unlikely to get anything quite on this type of scale anytime soon, especially since we recently got an entire Muppets series. I can guarantee you that this minifigure series was quite expensive for LEGO to produce and develop with all of these new head molds. But of course, that doesn't mean that LEGO is done with molded noses. If you think back to 2014, you might remember the birth of LEGO Minecraft with the micro-world sets such as the Village set, which included this brick-built villager figure complete with a large nose printed onto the face. A few years later in 2016, LEGO released The Village and The Melon Farm, which both included this villager minifigure with a properly molded nose in the center of his face. I mean, just look at the proboscis on these minifigures. These might just be the largest noses that LEGO has ever released, but only barely. I mean, Gonzo's nose is huge and probably wins the contest here. Also, let's not forget that in 2023, LEGO did something it had never done before when it released the Disney Collectible Minifigures 100th Anniversary Collection. While this line has a few standout entries, the only one that really fits here is Pinocchio. As a character, this puppet has one truly defining feature: his nose. Every other molded nose has come on a uniquely shaped head, but this was different. This was basically a regular, standard minifigure head, just with a long 3D nose that stuck out. While this is a super cool idea, it did mean that misprints were pretty common for this figure due to the way that LEGO prints heads. Now, throughout this entire video, I've been hinting at another facial feature that's often absent from minifigures: ears. Much like noses, these were left off of minifigures for quite some time, though they've slowly been appearing more and more as of late. Ears on LEGO figures go back quite a long way. I mentioned the Technic figures from 1993, but the first LEGO figures with ears go back even further. In fact, LEGO ears are even older than minifigures. In 1971, LEGO released the Homemakers line, which also had the Homemaker figures, which all had molded ears. Now, when it comes to printed ears, these are incredibly rare. In fact, LEGO has never printed ears on the side of a standard yellow minifigure head, but they have implied that they're there and that minifigures do have ears. Minifigure heads have been printed with visible hearing aids on the sides, which imply their existence, as well as accessories for minifigures such as headphones. Likewise, the Alloy minifigure from the Tall Neck set has a focused printed on the side of her head that's visible beneath her hairpiece. Largely though, ears have been relegated to uniquely molded heads such as Max Rebo from Star Wars, who also happens to have a super long nose, in addition to many of the Muppets, Stitch, and the Avatar figures mentioned earlier, just to name a few. Much like noses, adding molded ears to a minifigure head massively increases cost and the risk of misprints. Therefore, most ears are just added to minifigure hair pieces to keep the actual minifigure head uniform while still allowing for customization. You can see this when LEGO makes Elf minifigures, as well as certain Star Wars characters such as even PL, or even the Nesquik Bunny minifigure promotion. But these minifigures that we've talked about don't even compare to how ridiculous some of the worst LEGO minifigures are that have ever been made. Click here right now to see the most ridiculous minifigures, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more LEGO videos.